look back at my first year, I think when you're stamped out of the mold of teacher training and the curriculum and student teaching, you come out rather rigid. Many teachers go on through teaching tightening up the longer they teach. I think, to the contrary, I've kind of loosened up. At first, I expected the children to be a particular point at a particular time as a result of what I did. Shortly after about the first year, I began to look at the kids, and they just didn't seem to fit the mold that I had set up for them. So I guess as I got further along, I began to look at the kids to see what things they seemed to need to be happy. And I guess that means successful, but not in the classic material sense. Just able to be productive for themselves, and that'll make them productive for society. Thank you. You came in very well. Gentlemen, I think you might have almost outdone the ladies this morning. We'll see what happens next time around. What are we beginning today?
Drug abuse.
Drugs and drug abuse. Before we go into a program, I think it's important to find out what you know. Anything you want to talk about, because this is kind of a beginning idea. Let's find out where we are in our knowledge. Now, some people have talked, and other people don't seem to get involved. Go ahead and get involved.
Okay, well, some people have different feelings. Some they know it's bad for you, but they just take it because they don't have anything else to do. They have problems and they want to run away from it. And other people just do it just for fun.
Well, some people think, well, if I have one trip and it's not going to come back, I probably won't ever have it again. Then it does. You might have it again. And then you think, well, I had better take some more, just in case. And so they take some more.
They live their lives so dangerously, and they're afraid to sleep because, they're afraid they're going to crash while they're sleeping and they won't be able to wake up. And it's really dangerous because they can kill themselves.
Okay, you mentioned a crash. Some other things that you have heard about drugs, whether true or not, isn't important.
We have a friend and her daughter, she's 16, and she started drugs, and she started stealing from stores and everything.
And every day, Dad had friends over that take pot, and they would just take as much drugs as they could. And she would steal from her parents.
They give the first one to you free, so you get hooked on the first one, and then they try and sell you some more.
His wife was taking drugs, and he didn't know about it, and so she ended up in the hospital.
And she's in a critical list, and she's almost dead.
She didn't know who she was, or where she was, or she didn't know. It was like her brain had been completely washed out.
All right, with that comment, I think she summed it up quite well. Would you act, Richard, as our light monitor when I begin the film and it's running? Then we can click the lights off. And we'll let you take a look at an overview was the beginning of your program. Of the drug scene.
Asking where they were. Just finding out what they knew about drugs.
Okay, that was day one in the classroom presentation. Did they seem more knowledgeable than you thought they might be?
Yeah.
I kind of heard that with a gasp, because I could hear you going, hey, they know more than, we thought they knew. They do know more, and that's why you're getting, hopefully, 1.5 jumps ahead of them. They are well informed very often, but very often they haven't gotten the whole picture. They have just enough knowledge so that somebody will say, hey, I know they know what they're talking about. Did you feel the whole film was kind of a broad area? As you had mentioned over here, it's awful big. It doesn't go into much detail and it covers so much territory. I think it will be valuable to us as a group and for your note-taking and for gathering knowledge to break these down into big families of drugs. What are one or two of the big families we could break it into to study a type of drug? Did you see any coming out of this?
Morphine, uppers, downers.
Okay, you say uppers and downers. These are two of the families we're going to be studying. Does anyone know what an upper is actually called, the chemical name? Stimulants or? Amphetamine. Oh, my goodness. Okay. You've got a lot of knowledge going for you before we even get going. We won't go into the other families right now, but I know a lot of you collected articles over the last week or so, didn't you? How many found drug abuse articles?
In that paper next to you. Yeah.
All right. You know the big gray bogus that we have at school? You could fold over a piece and slide all your articles in there. Keep gathering them. Sometime during the week, I'm going to have you, as a group, work on a bulletin board somewhere over here.
Thinking back at the first stages, really, the whole thing began with an interest in drugs from probation department when I was a probation officer, and when I'd gotten into teaching, let it drop for those first couple of years in which I was trying to get my head straight on working with kids, and then after that I began to look into the programs I wanted. One was working in drug abuse. I felt that it should start down at elementary, and not much was being done at all in the city here, and really not much was being done nationally. So I called the only person I could think of, and that was somebody at working for the county or the city involved in drugs, and that was Dorothy Gildersleeve. My background in elementary ed and hers long time in drug abuse education. So we felt one priority should be a drug abuse class for teachers and for community people, teachers in particular, so they could kind of seed the area with programs.
What are you going to say? Because you're going to be asked every question that I might throw at you or Dorothy might throw at you. They're going to ask you. Where do you feel you're going to begin the program?
I think of the classrooms that I've visited, I've seen lots of information given about safe habits, lock your medicine cupboard, take only medicines that are prescribed for you, only with supervision. These things are going on in the classroom all of the time.
This is not a new program. This is not anything dangerous. It's been going on in various forms. I think you might include that as part of your presentation initially, the first step. It's not new. It's been going on in a fragmented manner in the schools. What you're hoping to present is an organized, scheduled pattern of concepts and growth in drug abuse. And so you're just bringing it together. In that way, you tend to play down the scare aspect. If it's presented as a hot new potato, you've got a problem right away, because what is new is not always accepted very quickly.
I wouldn't want to bring them in to scare them into it. I would just want to show them what materials we have available to us and what we hope to show the children.
A lot of the parents in the community have to be convinced, if there is a drug problem, that it does exist, or what maybe show them the potential of what can happen, because especially in the 6th grade, they'd rather, prefer that they stay sheltered and protected from it.
You'll be hard pressed to convince them.
When they were in your age group, Gina has been talking with a lot of young people, and she has had a drug problem in the past, and she wants to share this. She's on the Speakers Bureau for Valley College. So Gina, do you want to share some of the things with the boys and girls?
Right. When I was in, I guess, the 7th grade, and they called an assembly the way they did then, the whole school congregated, and they talked to us about drugs. And this goes back maybe 20 years ago, and they really told us some funny things. They were so ridiculous that we had to laugh, telling a lot of lies. Let's tell her the truth and see what happens. Let you make up your own mind about drugs. And I can tell you what happened to me. We all like to think that we're something special, but we find out that we're really just one like a whole lot of them. And I know a whole lot of drug addicts. One of my friends suggested that I take a couple uppers, or bennies, amphetamine, whatever we're calling them these days, whites. And I found that if I took a few bennies, it would give me a lot of energy, and I'd perk through my homework. I remember one night I stayed up all night to get a little rest at night. So that was pretty much the way I went along. Smoke a little grass in the afternoon, take a few uppers, then at night take a few downers, and the next morning need a few uppers again. At that time, it was mostly you used heroin if you were a hard drug user. I met a fellow, but he was using heroin, and I begged him, just don't do it, it's going to hurt you. It's poison, it'll kill you. And he ignored me, as most drug users do. And finally, one day, about 2 or 3 months later, I happened to look at this boy, and he hadn't fallen apart. It was, I thought it was a very funny thing. He was still looking fairly healthy. He looked good to me. He hadn't disintegrated, deteriorated, So I thought, well, I'll join him. I don't know, heroin is a life whereby if you get addicted, if you get a habit, strung out, whatever you call it, you have to have that narcotic in you every day. If you don't, you get sick. So usually you have to devote all your time to looking for that narcotic, for looking for the money to get that narcotic. You have to go to crime and then jail. If you don't overdose in the meantime and, die somewhere in the meantime. The first time you go to jail, you can usually call your mother or your father or one of your friends, if you still have any friends, and they'll come and bail you out. And if you have a good lawyer, you might get probation. But the second time or the third time comes when there's nobody to call. That cell door clangs shut, and you feel it. I'll tell you, I know we don't have too much more time in class, so does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
How young were you when you started?
I started smoking grass when I was about 13. Okay, yes, please.
What happens when you get busted? You're in jail and you cannot get a fix.
You get very, very sick, dear, and those jailers are cold-hearted. They are. Yes, sir.
How long have you been off drugs?
A year and a half, thank God. Yes.
What made you start to smoke grass?
It started for me.
And one of the parents did bring up the point that one of the addicts that children, ex-addicts that the children had heard, or I don't know who it was, showed how you sniff glue. And she was very upset about how it was going to lead her child down the path to drugs. So they weren't too happy with the program because it wasn't done by the LA City schools. And then my husband got up and said it probably was better because it wasn't done by the LA City schools.
These reports that you've been doing are valuable to us because you're updating our research right on to this time. You won't be able to find this stuff as readily as you might get it presented to you by the people in the class. It provides you with a real fast way of getting an answer. And children are going to demand that you have an answer, even if it's I don't know.
This free clinic on Lancashire Boulevard was started about 6 months ago. It's been a year and a half it's taken it to open up. And the lady that started it, she said that really shocked me. She said that their biggest problem now is heroin. And they're getting all kinds of calls from college people trying to either kick the habit or having a hard time.
I chose the subject of marijuana because I knew so little about it, and I'd heard so much about everyone else knowing more about it than I did, so I thought I'd better know how to deal with it in the classroom. And I was thinking, I have a coffee habit, and I tried, and I really have cut down. I was glad you suggested that because it really brings home how difficult it must be for somebody who is really habituated to a drug to know how difficult it must be for them to overcome it.
What types of drugs have you used? Well, over a period of about 6 or 7 years, I guess I've tried and used marijuana, hashish, some hallucinogenics, including LSD and mescaline. One time, let's say every 6 months, and that time on a small amount basis. I've heard of younger kids who have taken hallucinogenics quite frequently, like 2 or 3 times a week, within a couple months span, and it does have some pretty nasty effects. But I think that if you got as loaded as you do behind a hallucinogenic with alcohol during the same amount of time, you'd have DTs and be put in a hospital anyway.
Maybe a person with that type of personality, the personality that might try drugs in the first place, maybe all we have to do is find some type of medicine and it will alleviate this.
I think that the only way you can effectively control drug abuse in any school is if the administrators recognize that there is a problem.
So very important because a lot of people just assume children realize that these medicines are not to be taken, that they are not candy.
Well, he showed me the rap sheet. We saw that when we went to the jail.
Narcotics when we refer to narcotics, generally we're referring to opium and drugs that are made from opium, such as heroin.
And within 3 hours, all 12 rats were dead.
However, it's as much the person as the content in our classroom. And I think we often tend to forget it. I know that I do. And I have to remind myself to forget very often getting to a certain point at a certain time and remember that I'm working with
people and growing kids, and that their problems are evident by what they do right in the classroom. And I think you're quite aware of that.
You can be reading to yourself what it is, and then I'll explain it a little bit further. Would you pass that up to each person? Well, these particular little things you're getting, I'd like you to look over the directions just quickly as you get it. See if you can figure out what it is, and I'll read it to you in just a moment when everybody has a copy. It's called the Where I Want to Be ladder. If this ladder represents all the things you always wanted to be in your life, or all the things that you ever expect to feel, where would you think you would be on it in 5 years? Now, the top of the ladder, or 10.
This little ladder that you see is an interesting kind of tool because children love it. You explain to the children that this is just for them. And it's to find out, on a scale of 10, where they hope they might be in 5 years. Realistically, where do they think they might be if everything were on a scale of 10? And put an X down where you feel you'll be. And they'll ask you, well, what do you mean, where will I be? And your response might be, well, I don't know, what does it mean to you? On a scale of 10, all your life, all your achievements, all your feelings, where would you like to be, realistically? Mark an X. And the kids will ponder and their expressions will change and they're rather fun to watch. They'll mark an X somewhere. Well, let's think about what that ladder represents. Our whole life is there on the ladder on a 1 to 10 scale. Okay, in 5 years, where do you expect to be in all your feelings about yourself or all your achievements on that ladder of 10? The top is the most, 1 is the least. I'd like you to think about it as you mark an X somewhere where you think you'll be in 5 years.
Can we hear this again, like those things that we had?
You see it's similar to what we were doing before? Similar, but not the same. It's where you expect to be in 5 years. Go ahead and make an X. I'll kind of walk around. Is there anyone who has not marked an X? Now that you have marked an X for where you think you're going to be in 5 years, I'd like you to put a 0 where you think you are now. Don't have to let any neighbors know if you don't want. This is just for you. Pen doesn't work. Well, try again. Circle where you think you are now, and the X for where you're going to be in 5 years, you think. Would you pass all those forward now? I'll give them back to you in 3 or 4 months. How's that? Would you like to do another one in 3 or 4 months? Okay, you're on. When we come back as a science group in the spring, we'll pick this up, all right? You can look back and see where you were way back in the dark ages of 1970. Would you collect them all across the front for me, please? Is that hard? Does it make you think a little bit? What did you think about as you did that?
Thought about what you want to be in 5 years. Maybe how you would progress in 5 years. Like let's say you're doing, let's say like in math, let's say you're doing, not that great. Maybe in 5 years you might be an expert in it. You never know.
Well, it feels like how popular you are now, and like how you're doing in school, like Jerry said, and how the people like you around.
About where you are now and where you want to go and how you're going to get there.
Whether you feel like you're number 1 or you're number 1 million, and you put it in the box.
Well, where you are right now, like, you might be a 4, and you're thinking about how far you'll be up, like, when you're old.
Meant a lot of different things to different people here, didn't it? Seemed that to some it meant school, to some it meant popularity, to some it meant other things. I saw a lot of quizzical expressions as you kind of went, wow, where am I going to be in 5 years? Well, that's something we think about, particularly when we deal with drug abuse. Because in 5 years, most of you are going to be from 16 to 17 years old.
And so they've locked themselves in time and space to a feeling about where they are and where they're going.
Might this not be a pretty valuable tool in launching a discussion about feelings? And certainly, right into the drug abuse program, you can go about feelings about oneself and how they're affected by drugs. Next letter D after that.
Feelings.
Bingo, okay. Your feelings about me. Now, I sat and said, what a great group you are. Wow, you're really terrific. You come in here and get all your papers out in the morning, and you really do a good job. And you're looking at me like, well, he's saying that we're doing a good job, but he's what? You didn't feel it right, did you? Well, we're going to start working a little bit more on feelings in here. Now, we've been getting the facts. You know about amphetamines, and you know about barbiturates, and part of you are going to do something quite different from anything you've done in any other class, I think. And it may put you in a strange position. Go along with it. Let's see what happens. For instance, I would select... Oh, now, we don't need hands, but I'll just go around. Maybe one of them to go outside. You'll be going outside. You'll be going outside. Now, Jay, I think you were the last of the 4 boys. If you'd like to go outside right now, style. Used it at school and with 6th graders, and the technique to get them into it by having the children first talk to each other for 5 minutes about anything. They must sit and face each other, and whether they do nothing, they're supposed to talk to each other, and they must face each other. And after a while, these twos talk to each other, boy, girl, boy, whatever.
Any way they want.
In any way they want to about anything. What did you feel the purpose of this was, if any?
To communicate. Yeah, with other people. To be able to communicate with someone else other than someone that you know also, that you know very well, and also maybe with the opposite sex, because we're kind of silly about that.
And see what other people think about other subjects.
We communicate.
Communicate?
We talk.
We'll talk about those.
Talk.
Why couldn't we talk more? Did your time seem to go fast?
Yeah.
Or did it seem to drag?
I think that we've only got to one person. I think that we should have more time discussion here.
Some discussions out here? Yeah. I wish that we had more time for it, and maybe we'll make some more time. We won't make this the last then, all right? One of the children in that group, he learned to talk to a girl. A couple of kids got invited to parties at the end of the year that said, I never thought I was going to get invited to a party. And then I began to talk, and they found out I really wasn't so bad. And I found out that girls really weren't so rough. They began to talk. So that technique might be a lead-in to using this, whether on the elementary or the secondary. We presented it just as another tool you could use. And it ties right in with your drug abuse, sensitizing them to feel that they are A, worthwhile, and that others are worthwhile. But these tools, along with your self-evaluation tools, can be a valuable way to get kids to see you as a human being, because nobody but a human being would put on this kind of program. And often we aren't seen as teachers as being human. I mean, we don't eat and sleep, you know, and things. Or they've run across a teacher that hasn't been human. But at least I think we'll come to the conclusion that they're worth working for, aren't they? The kids?
That was real interesting, because before you didn't know anything about it. You know, you just saw the headlines in the paper and everything. Now when you see something, you know what's going on.
It was a good class, and I learned a lot about drugs. I mean, when I didn't know anything about drugs, I was curious what they would do to you.
If you just picture yourself taking even one, you can say that's not going to hurt me. You can keep on taking them, and then after a while, that something bad is going to happen to you. There's no doubt about it. Why should you take drugs? Just, live a happy life and not just start something stupid. And that's about all.